The night swallowed him whole the moment the last vehicle disappeared over the ridge. Gunfire cracked in the distance, uneven and searching, and the radio in his ear hissed once before going dead. Left behind in enemy territory, bleeding and alone, he understood the cruel truth of silence out here. It wasn't peace. It was a warning. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. His name was Ethan Krause, and he had always believed that fear announced itself loudly. Panic, racing breath, shaking hands. But lying flat against the cold dirt, moonlight barely touching the broken walls around him, fear arrived quietly. It settled into his chest and stayed there, heavy and patient. The extraction had gone wrong. A single explosion, a rushed call, and suddenly the team was gone, forced to move or die. Ethan had been hit in the confusion, dragged himself into cover, and then nothing. The night air smelled of dust and burned metal. Somewhere nearby, insects chirred as if the world hadn't just cracked open. Ethan pressed his palm against his side, feeling warmth seep between his fingers. Not fatal. Not yet. He exhaled slowly, counting the seconds, forcing his thoughts into order. Training whispered that survival was possible. Experience whispered that survival was never guaranteed. He thought of his sister then, the last person he'd spoken to before deployment. She had joked about the silence, about how he always disappeared for months and returned like nothing had happened. He had promised her he'd come back. The memory tightened around his ribs. Promises felt fragile out here. A flicker of movement caught his eye. Shapes on the ridge. Voices carried on the wind, low and urgent. The enemy patrol was closer than he'd hoped. Ethan flattened himself further into the earth, heart pounding, rifle steady, despite the tremor in his hands. He could hear them now. Boots, scuffing stone, a cough, the clink of metal. If they found him, it would be quick. Or it would be slow. Neither option offered mercy. He thought he'd never hear a friendly voice again. He was wrong. The radio crackled once, so faint he almost imagined it. Ethan froze. Another hiss. Then a whisper, distorted but unmistakable. Cross. If you can hear me, stay still. His breath caught. It was Captain Mara Klein, the team's sniper, the one who always watched from the shadows while others moved. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be miles away, safe, already regrouping. Ethan pressed the transmitter close to his mouth, barely daring to speak. "I'm here," he murmured. "I'm hit." Silence answered him, long, heavy. Then her voice returned, steadier than the night itself. "I see them," she said. "Don't move." From her position high above the ruins, Mara lay prone, rifle aligned. I pressed a glass. The world narrowed to breadth and distance, to angles and wind. Below her, enemy fighters moved through moonlight, unaware that the darkness was already measuring them. She had broken protocol to come back. She knew the cost. She also knew she couldn't leave him. The moral weight pressed on her as surely as gravity. One shot would give her away. More would bring everything down on her position. But doing nothing would mean watching Ethan disappear into the night forever. The patrol split. Two moved closer to Ethan's hiding place. One laughed softly, careless. Mara's finger tightened on the trigger, then eased. She waited. She always waited. Timing was everything. Down below, Ethan heard footsteps growing louder. He tasted iron, whether from blood or fear he couldn't tell. His mind raced through impossible calculations. If he fired, they'd know where he was. If he didn't, they'd find him anyway. He closed his eyes for half a second, steadying himself. Whatever happened next, he would face it awake. The shot came like a held breath finally released. One moment there were three figures moving through the dark. The next one crumpled without a sound, collapsing as if the night itself had pulled him down. The others froze, confusion rippling through them. Shouts followed, sharp and angry. Gunfire erupted, wild and panicked, tearing into walls and sending dust raining down. Mara moved immediately, already shifting position as return fire cracked toward where she had been. She slid across rock and dirt, heart steady, mind clear. Another shot, another enemy fell. The third ran, shouting into the darkness. Ethan didn't wait, dragged himself backward, teeth clenched, using the chaos as cover. Each movement sent pain lancing through his side, but adrenaline carried him. He felt the night open, felt possibility rush in where despair had been. Above, Mara tracked the fleeing figure. Wind shifted, distance recalculated. This was the shot that mattered. Not just for survival, but for silence. For the chance to disappear again. She squeezed. The figure dropped. The gunfire stopped. For a moment the world held still. No shouting, no movement, just the night breathing again. Mara reached Ethan minutes later, emerging from shadow like a ghost. She knelt beside him, hands already working, voice low and calm. "You look terrible," she said softly. He laughed, a weak, disbelieving sound. "You came back." "Of course I did," she replied, as if there had never been another option. They moved together then, slow and careful, two figures reclaiming the dark. When the extraction finally came, rotors cutting through the silence Ethan had feared, he looked back once at the ruins below. The place where he'd been left behind no longer felt like an ending. It felt like a crossing. Later, wrapped in light and noise and life, Ethan understood something he hadn't before. Silence could mean many things. It could mean abandonment. Or it could mean trust, the kind that waits in the dark, watching, ready to act when everything else falls away. Because courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives as one quiet shot that brings the night to rest. And long after the echoes faded, the silence he feared became the silence that saved him. If this story stayed with you, share where you're watching from and what moment moved you most. Subscribe to Whispered Words for more human stories of courage, sacrifice, and the unseen bonds that pull us back from the dark. Because some stories are indeed meant to end in silence. And neither are you.